Hello, everybody, and welcome. This is Gabby Panetta, and this is the Soul Talk podcast. I have the pleasure of introducing today Rory Moon, who is a crystal entrepreneur and expert. Hi, Rory. Welcome to the show. Thank you.
Hi, Gabby. Happy to
Hi.
be here.
It's so exciting to have you. It's not our first conversation, but I love speaking with you because you're so knowledgeable about crystals and just such a badass in your business anyway, that I wanted to have this conversation on a from a different perspective. I think the first one we had was a little bit basic, and this one is just taking it a little bit further. So without even wasting any time, I'm just going to get into the questions if you don't mind.
Let's do it.
All right. So what are crystals? How do you define crystals?
Okay, so I've been doing some preparing for this podcast, and I was like, well, what is a crystal? Like, I would try not to get too like metaphysical on this. But in its basis term, a crystal is a solid whose atoms are arranged in a highly ordered repeating pattern. I ripped that right off of Google. I did not make that up. But what I thought was really interesting about that is the idea of the repeating pattern. So any kind of lump of something that's creating these patterns can be classified as a crystal, and that can include even salt. Because I've actually seen some people selling salt as a crystal. In the metaphysical world, when we're talking about crystals, what we're really referring to is something that has energy to it. I've heard some people even refer to their petrified wood or their fossils as their crystals. So it's kind of become a little bit of a looser term in that sense.
Interesting.
Sparkly things, gems, rocks, it's all all
Right.
the same.
Well, yeah, because I remember picking up rocks when I was a kid. Before rocks and crystals became a thing, I would just, and people would look at me like I was crazy. And my dad and I would go rock picking, and we thought it was cool. Of course, only nerds think that.
Yes, I was also one of those nerds.
But it was amazing. And just intuitively, I just felt that there was something with these rocks, and I felt a connection to the rocks. And the shinier they were, the prettier they were, and the more attractive they were to me, not knowing at all that they have these amazing healing qualities about them.
Mhm.
And so as I grew and became an adult and exposed myself to more of the metaphysical world, I realized, oh my gosh, we kind of intuitively know that they're coming from Mother Earth and therefore they're healing.
Yeah, like even those garden rocks. I know my mom used to yell at me because I would pick them out of the garden. She's like, "No, those are for the garden." I was like, "It's actually my friend and it's coming inside." And she was like, "Please stop taking the rocks out of the garden."
Yeah. All right. So I guess that, the next question is, where do they come from? We've established that.
They come from the ground. They are,
Yeah.
they are beautiful little gifts from Mother Earth. And what's really amazing is they can be found all over the world. And different regions are more famous for different kinds of mines. Like we have a really awesome mine here in Ontario for amethyst. That where a lot of the amethyst around the world is coming from. There's also great mines in Brazil for amethyst. So, yeah, they can come from anywhere, even your mother's garden.
And what's interesting to me is that, we're all chemical beings. Everybody has something from the periodic table, and the crystals are actually formations from those chemicals, and they crystallize, and that's hence the word crystal. Um, but it's just amazing how, depending on where you are in the world, they have mines of that you can find different stones because of the composition from the stars that left
Mhm.
those remnants in Mother Earth here. So I find it fascinating now. The more I study about them, and it's a very complex subject, of course. But I don't like to get technical about things. I'd rather focus on the energetic aspect of things. So um,
Yes.
when I look at stones, like I have a tendency to be drawn to raw stones. I don't really like
Mhm.
polished stones. And one of the questions that I have for you is, what is the difference between a polished stone? I know what my perception of it is, but I want to know what your viewpoint is on it. The difference between a polished stone and a rough or raw stone, and the different types of stones, because sometimes you find there's towers, there's
Mhm.
points. Does it really matter? What are they used for? Why are they shaped in different ways? I know.
As with everything in our line of business, there is meaning that can be attributed to everything. So the way I look at it is something like a polished stone. So for those watching on YouTube, I have a sphere crystal here. It's a beautiful blue apatite. And when you're looking at this crystal, it has no points, no edges. It's all the same all the way around. So the energy is actually being diffused really evenly from all areas. So this is a kind of crystal that would be really great if you're trying to change energy in your space, because it's just going to kind of like effortlessly diffuse everywhere. When you're looking at something like a point, so I'm just showing a raw quartz. This is actually a self-healed quartz. I mean, we can talk about this later if you'd like. So this crystal has a point on one end. It's broken off from its base on the end, so it's not going to stand up or anything. And because it's focused like this, it's doing exactly that. It's focusing the energy. So this could be used in healing if you wanted to kind of pinpoint an area in the body that needed to be balanced. It can also work in directing energy. So either attracting things inward to this or attracting energy inward to your space, or creating a kind of force field outward in your space if you're trying to do like something that's more protecting. So I love a good point.
So it's kind of
I
like
love points.
magic wand, right? Like a choke.
Yes, they are definitely a magic wand.
Okay.
And then when you're looking at something like a point, sorry, anyone who's looking on YouTube, you can see that this has like a flat base so it can stand up, similar to a point that is raw, but this one has been touched by humans, so it's been shaped. This is not how this crystal grows. So that's where different schools of thought start coming in on, what is better, a raw crystal or a polished or a shaped crystal. And I think that really depends on what you're looking for. The raw crystals have not been touched, so they're a little bit more, in my opinion, they're stronger because they haven't been kind of interrupted by humans. But I still will use my spheres and my towers and that sort of thing for different purposes. So I'm not an all the way one way or all the way the other. I'm kind of living in the gray area, and whatever intention or whatever use that I need to use that crystal in, I'll pull in the right one for it.
Awesome. Okay, yeah. Well, that's good to know. Yeah, I tend to gravitate towards the raw ones. I just feel their energy, and I'm an empath, a huge empath, so I feel the energy. And
oh, really? I had no idea.
I know.
Just kidding.
and I do feel a huge difference between the raw crystals and the polished crystals, and it is because they've been manipulated. They've been in the polishing process. I believe does affect them. They don't lose all of their qualities, but to me, I just find it's my preference to work with raw crystals.
And you know what's so funny? I'll tend to recommend a polished or like a palm stone, something that's been very smoothed out for somebody who's new to working with crystals, because it's very soft. Like the energy of those kinds of crystals is definitely softer.
That's super important. Yeah. Mm-hmm. The last thing you want is a too strong of a crystal and they have no idea what's going on.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, awesome. Well, I'm glad I learned that today. That's amazing. So what is better for you in terms of, because crystals can be used in a lot of things. I wear a lot of crystal jewelry, especially when I'm doing readings, because we need protection, we need to connect with divine energy, and it makes me feel happy inside. What's your preference, or do you have a recommendation as to wearing jewelry, either as pendants, earrings, bracelets, anklets? Some people wear crowns and
tiaras.
It's everybody's preference. I mean, there's no judgment, but for you, is it better to sort of hold it in your hand, have it in your house, or are there also different applications depending on the use?
All of the above. I don't know. Some people might have a love-hate relationship with this podcast because I'm going to give you information and then backtrack on what I'm saying and tell you something completely different. But that's just the way the practice goes. So with jewelry, that one is very personal. So you're bringing that into your personal, like bubble.
Right.
It has also been manipulated, right? So if you're wearing a beaded bracelet, maybe it's a little bit softer because it's been tumbled and manufactured and that sort of thing. If it's a raw crystal, obviously it's, again, you're bringing it really, really close to you if it's like a raw pendant. And you also have to keep in mind that that's a raw pendant, for example, around your neck that's very close to your heart chakra. So there are different placements along the body that are good to be aware of. So if I wear any bracelets on my right hand, on my left hand, for example, that's your side that's aligning with your divine feminine, and that is calling things in to receive. Whereas if you were to put the bracelet on the right hand, that is in line with your divine masculine, and that is more putting out. So I would wear protection bracelets on my right hand to kind of protect outwardly. And then I would wear my intuition bracelets, my channeling bracelets, anything like that on my left hand. That way I'm like receiving the message or receiving the self-confidence or receiving that, stress release or whatever it is that's like coming inwards to me. So that's something you can keep in mind. And the same would go for crystal rings if you're wearing those on certain hands. That's always good to keep in mind. I do all of the above, by the way. I wear them, I hold them, I put them around my house, so I can speak to everything. When you're holding it, I think that is actually almost more so than jewelry. I think when somebody is intentionally going out and buying a crystal and not knowing what to do with it, the first thing they're going to do is hold it. Right? Like jewelry, they'll kind of buy it, not thinking of the intention. But when people are buying crystals, like, for example, if they just like bought this like raw chunk of like calcite, they're like, I don't know what to do with it, but they fiddle with it. They kind of hold it. They like move back and forth. So I find that like that's the gateway position of like working with crystals. And then it kind of works into like, okay, I'm going to meditate. Oh, I'm fiddling with my crystal while I'm meditating. Oh, how nice does this feel? And then it kind of steamrolls from there. And then, like I was saying, any crystals that you're kind of putting around your house, the placement is important to be aware of, and the crystal that you're using, because that can attract or protect you from certain things. So, I mean, I could give you a little quick feng shui of crystals that I keep around the house if you'd like. So I have a couple of favorites. I won't go to the extended list, but black obsidian arrowheads, specifically an arrowhead because it's a symbol of protection. This is where the shape becomes important, as well as the obsidian itself repels negative energy. So that's taken into consideration the actual crystal. And then the placement where I put it is right by my front door. So if you have like a really thick ledge over your door, you can put it on there. Some people like put it in little bags and like tie it to their front door, or just put it by a table near your front door, whatever it is, as long as it's as close to the door as you can get. That's warding off any unwanted negative energy from people coming into your house. People might unintentionally bring some weight into your house and you don't want that. So that's a nice, easy way to just kind of keep that stuff out and only let the nice stuff in. I also love working with citrine or pyrite and keeping that near my wallet or in my purse, depending on what you carry, because that attracts abundance and prosperity. And you can't go wrong with keeping a little, even if it's a tiny piece of pyrite or a little tiny citrine, like in your change purse or something. Nice. Works wonders.
Amazing. Good. Okay. Yeah, because I've heard, some people will put certain crystals on opposite corners. Like, so if your house is kind of like a square or a rectangle, just on opposite corners or all the corners, certain types of crystals. I haven't gone that far, but I do have a lot of crystals in my house. I think I know any metaphysical person that doesn't have a lot of crystals in their home.
No, but like it would be interesting for you to see which crystals you have and where, and how that might be like, whether I don't know if you put them there intentionally or you're just saying, hey, this like looks good here, I'm going to keep it here. But if that was the case, then kind of thinking, okay, what crystal was that? What room is it in? Do I want it in this room? Like citrine, I love putting in the living room because it attracts joy and like, yes, abundance as well. But like, that's a space you spend a lot of time in. Or maybe it's the dining room where you're always having like family dinner or something like that. Like those spaces, you really want to have that nice light, creative energy, just keep everybody happy.
Nice. Good to know. Christmas time coming up.
Yeah, just tape a little black obsidian underneath everyone's chair and
So nobody
that'd be
brings up
great.
their junk during Christmas. Keep your junk outside.
Exactly,
I
exactly.
love it. Okay. So, why are crystals helpful to us?
Why are they helpful?
Mhm.
That's such a loaded
I
question,
know.
Gabby. Um, I think what, in my opinion, why they're so helpful is because they're carrying their own energy. So they're able to support us in ways that we don't necessarily know how to support ourselves. Like, I find them as really, like, if I don't know what I'm feeling, but I go to a store and I'm like, ooh, this crystal is really pretty. And I buy it and it makes me happy. I don't know why it's making me happy. I don't know why I feel better now that I have this in my bag. But it's kind of doing subconscious work in that way. And I mean, who doesn't like things to happen on autopilot, right? Isn't that just like what everybody wants? Just no
Yeah,
work and just things to get fixed without any work.
absolutely. You hit it right on the. Yep. All right.
Yeah.
So,
But may I caveat that, Gabby,
yeah.
because there is a lot of people who will buy a crystal and say, well, I'm anxious, so I bought a crystal to help with my anxiety. Why am I not getting better? So I think that it's not just the act of buying the crystal and taking it home.
Mhm.
I might be jumping ahead in some of your questions, but you need to work with the crystal. It is called a practice because it needs to be consistent, daily, maybe weekly, depending on your schedules. Live your best life. But it's not as simple as, well, I bought it, I should be fixed now. Because it is still you as the person who needs to make that change in your life,
Even with the crystal, you still need
even with the
to do the
crystal.
work.
Yes.
Touching. Okay. Now, that's amazing. I love that. I think this is my biggest takeaway from all of it. The
Hmm.
crystal isn't going to do it all for you. You still have to put effort into it. So work
Exactly.
towards it. Um, what are some of the must do things that people should do with crystals, such as clearing, charging them, and how should they do this and when? Because, if I'm new at this, I may not know that because a crystal has been handled by someone else, I may want to clear it.
Hmm.
What's your recommendation for newbies?
Okay. So, two schools of thought on charging and clearing crystals, which I love because they are completely opposed. One school of thought says clearing is good, you must clear, charge, what have you. Other school of thought is clearing is irrelevant. You should never have to clear your crystals.
I see.
So, um, when the school of thought that's saying clearing is good, that is for the reasons that you're saying. It's been at a store, it's been handled by the miners, the polishers, the shippers, the sales associate, the other people at the store who picked it up and touched it or whatever. And therefore, there could be some energy kind of living on those crystals still, and we want to remove that.
Right.
So if that feels like what you prescribe to, and again, for the record, I do both. I cleanse and charge, and I also don't cleanse and charge. It really just depends on what intuitively is coming forward. So if I feel that a crystal needs to be cleansed or charged, and I say those words interchangeably because the practice is the same, in the sense that you can clear it or with smoke, you can clear it with Reiki, like just with intention. You can clear it with sound, like with a bell. You could also clear it with a selenite or a clear quartz, which in this school of thought, selenite and clear quartz never need to be cleansed because they are the cleansers.
Mhm.
They are the master healers in that sense.
Right.
Um, in the school of thought that's saying you don't have to clear,
Mhm.
what their thought is that crystals are energy and they are able to take and remove what needs to be done. They kind of are self, what's the word I'm looking for? Not self-contained.
Uh,
Anyways, the word's escaping me. It must not be the right word.
self-sus-
I don't know what word I'm trying to think of. It's gone. But they kind of take care of themselves, self-sustainable. There we go. Haha, thank you. They're self-sustainable in that sense. So you don't have to clear them because they're here to clear you, or they're here to charge you. They're here to amplify your intention. Again, two different schools of thought. In my mind, neither is right or wrong. It just depends on what you're feeling. If you did want to clear your crystals, some people like to do it right after they've worked with them. So if they've used it in a meditation, or if they've been wearing it all day, sometimes it's as simple as putting it in a selenite bowl to store it. Like if we're talking jewelry that you've been wearing, it doesn't have to be a huge ritual.
Right.
It can be very simple.
And I know some people have said, clear it in the sunlight or clear it in the moonlight, or yeah. And I, like you, I can do both. I sometimes clear, I sometimes don't. But I know that crystals have the ability to amplify, absorb, transmute, and cleanse, ground. So they do have their own energy. But I do believe that just sometimes clearing the intention, especially, and this is because something my great aunt told me a long time ago, is that don't ever wear somebody else's jewelry because they're metals and crystals, they will absorb that person's energy. And you may not realize that you're picking up on their energy or actually behaving like they did because it's affecting you. So that was very interesting to me. And so anytime that I buy anything that's been touched by anybody else, whether it's new or used, it gets cleared.
Clear. Yeah, absolutely. So I'm going to challenge you, Gabby, because where's the fun if I just like roll over? But some people see that energy from other people as knowledge. So there's a lot of crystal skulls that are so old that nobody actually knows where they came from. There's a lot of stories that they may be from ancient civilizations and that sort of thing. So clearing something like that would remove all of that knowledge and all of that, like all of its like power in that way. So I think, again, this is why there's two schools. I'm also a Gemini, so there's a lot of like duality in the way that I think. So let's not be surprised by this.
So what does it mean when someone says their crystals are charged? And I can tell you that I can tell when people charge their crystals. I can walk by a show and I will see one table and another table, and I know who charged their crystals and who didn't. And I will gravitate towards the people who charge their crystals with love, because that's what I love. So what does it mean that they've charged them?
So they've kind of taken a step in the right direction to help you with the intention setting. And they have put their intention of love and light into the crystals that they own or that they're selling. And again, they're just starting to almost warm the crystal up for you, if you want to look at it like that. It's like, I'm going to start setting an intention for you, a good intention, and then that crystal is already going to kind of be like toasty when you get it, and you're like, oh yeah, there's something good here. And I know you can tell.
I do. Yeah, and I just find that it's very interesting, because the ones that don't get charged feel very flat to me.
Yeah.
And but I also know that if you buy a flat crystal, you can charge it yourself.
Yeah, so, absolutely. I'm jumping ahead, but I have lots to say about how to buy a crystal. So we'll just put a pin in that. We'll get back to that. Stay tuned.
Okay. So I've heard other people say that we need to develop a relationship with our crystals. What's your view on that?
1,000%. There's no two schools of thought on this. This is just crystals are energy. Crystals are, I don't want to say sentient, but they're carrying a lot. And if you have a relationship with them, they will have a relationship back with you. So there are certain crystals that I go to for certain things. And some of them, I'll get into some examples, but some of them I have set the intention that this is going to be a crystal for this. Other crystals, I just always gravitate for the same situation. So like my self-healed quartz point, I didn't buy this and charge it or like put an intention on it that this was going to be my reading crystal, but every time I've gone to a show where I'm doing readings, this crystal is coming with me, and I hold it while I'm doing readings, or it's like beside me. It's like my little apprentice, and it's always there. So I think that's really cool as well. So that was like kind of like kismet, like we were like, two like lost souls that found each other. And then there are other crystals that I need to coax a little bit more and be like, okay, so I know the properties of you as a crystal. For example, an amethyst for anxiety. Let's like go with that. It's a very simple one. So if I have an amethyst and I'm like, okay, you're going to be like my anxiety crystal. And every time I'm feeling anxious, I'm going to grab this crystal. I've already kind of said in my mind, like you're going to work and this is what your job description is. And like I said, sometimes there's a calling and the crystal chooses the job that it wants. And sometimes, it's a little bit of a low performer and you need to give it some instructions, but they work great.
It makes total sense. And here's the other thing too, that everyone in the metaphysical industry will agree to this, I'm sure, that the crystals call you. So when you're walking through a show or you're at a store and you see a crystal and you're drawn into it, it's because the crystal's calling you, not the other way around. Mm-hmm. So that's the magical part about crystals. So they always say the one that you touched first, that's the one you need to take with you, because that's the one that called you. So
absolutely.
I
that does become dangerous when you start touching like many crystals, and then you're like, but I kind of touched them all first, so I'll just take them all.
I know. And you can never have too many crystals, but my husband would differ.
Don't they always?
Yeah. So and I know that, this is probably a very silly question, but from the newbie perspective, can crystals be used as a divination tool?
Yes, absolutely. And I think that kind of blends off of building a relationship with a crystal. Because so when you're doing divination, you're trying to understand your current situation or future situation or past situations. And so there's a practice called lithomancy, which is funny because I don't know if a newbie would even know that it existed, because it's not very commonly talked about. Even I didn't really know about it until like more recently. So I'm letting you guys in on a great trade secret. It's a really cool divination tool called lithomancy. Look it up. And what's cool about that is you're using stones, and again, stones placement on like a mat. And then based on your relationship with that stone and where it's falling in the placement, you're able to interpret what that means. So you can't really do that unless you have a relationship with your crystals and know what each of those little, and usually they're like smaller tumbled stones, but like each of those crystals represents for you.
Interesting.
Very fun.
So it's kind of like runes are used, or, some people use bones or small stuff. Yep. It's the same thing with the crystals. You kind of shake them up, you throw them on a table, kind of like
like dice. Yeah.
Dice. Yeah. And oh, interesting. I was actually, and this is it. I mean, I have seen it, but I hadn't made that connection. But, I know that some people will actually use the crystal ball. That's how typically psychics have been portrayed in movies in the past. They will look at a crystal ball and they will get information from the crystal ball. It's not necessarily that they see the movie in the ball, well, maybe a holographic movie, but the crystal actually facilitates the vision for them. And and others, it doesn't have to be a crystal ball, but if they just hold a crystal or look at a crystal on a table and they start getting the information about the person, and the crystal is the divination tool. So it's interesting that they can also, and I never would have thought that crystals would also be used in the same way that maybe runes are used.
Yeah. And even like you're talking about the crystal ball, you can do that as well with a black obsidian bowl and water. So that's a really cool thing for newbies to try. If you have a clear crystal, a clear quartz ball, or like a black obsidian something, you can start with like an open eye meditation and just kind of let your gaze soften. And then yes, sometimes you will physically see things, but sometimes it's more just in your mind's eye that you're seeing things. It's very cool, very freaky when it like connects for the first time. You're like, whoa, my God. Like the first time I did an open eye meditation, half of my face transformed into my grandmother. And I just like I like got scared. I was like, oh my God. And I just like shook myself out. I'm like, no, wait, I need to do that again. And so I like had to recenter myself. And it was very, very cool. But also a little startling.
Amazing. Okay. So, which are the do's and the don'ts when it comes to crystals? And does it apply to all the crystals?
So my do's and don'ts that I like to focus on are more to do with the physical properties of the crystal. So there are some crystals that, for example, when we're talking about charging, you can charge in water, in a river, because that's a lot of like energy by a waterfall. But some crystals like selenite will disintegrate in water. So do not charge selenite in water. You will not have a crystal.
Where did it go?
Point blank.
It disappeared. Magic.
It will be gone. You will think you did a magic trick. You didn't. It just disintegrated. Same with salt crystal, like salt rock. There's like Himalayan crystals and stuff like that that people use in their practice as well. You cannot charge that in water. It will disintegrate. Similar with the sun. So I know a lot of people love to keep their big, juicy amethysts and citrines and rose quartzes on their windowsill. And they're like, oh my gosh, it's so beautiful. But they actually will fade in the sun. So I would be mindful of that. Again, it's not changing the property of it, so to speak. It's more of a, it's the color's just becoming more dull. So you might not want that for your crystal. Am I saying don't put on your windowsill? I'm absolutely not saying that, but just something to be aware of. And then there are some crystals that when you wear them, you can have like a reaction to them. I don't know if this is the answer you wanted, Gabby, but this is the one you're getting.
Like I can't wear certain metals. So yeah, my go-to.
Exactly. Yeah. So pyrite is a crystal that I've seen sold in like beads, but it's very metallic in nature and you can get like a rash from it. And same with bismuth, which is actually a completely man-made crystal. It looks like little pyramid steps. Like the pattern is actually made in a lab. And it's like a rainbow, like ombre rainbow. You may have seen them around. But anything like that, like if it's held on the skin for too long, you may get like a reaction to it. But all of those things aside, I don't think there's any do's and don'ts. Because you need to figure out what is working for yourself. People like myself will give recommendations or guides of where to start. But if I were to say something that didn't resonate with your experience, the last thing I want is someone to feel like they've been doing it wrong just because I didn't say that exact experience. Right. One of the fun things I love to do with talking with other crystal practitioners is like, hey, like, what do you use for this? They're like, I use this. I was like, oh, I never even thought of that. Like, I always use sodalite for that. And here you are saying you're using amethyst. Like, oh my gosh, I never would have thought of that. Which is also part of the fun,
Right. Yeah. And this is why I even do this podcast, is because of all of the different perspectives, depending on the train of thought and the school of thought, and different experiences as well. Yay, that was awesome. Thank you so much. So how do people contact you if they want to know more about crystals or if they want to buy crystals from you?
Yeah. So if you want to learn more, you can reach out to me at Rory Moon on Instagram. So that's ROREY Moon. You can also visit my website at rorymoon.com. There's a bunch of blogs on there about working with crystals and just some fun things to do. If you're really keen, send me a DM on Instagram and I can send you a link to my entire crystal directory. I have over, what is it now? I want to say like over 200 crystal property descriptions that I've kind of channeled or kind of experienced through my life. So as I find new crystals, I figure out what they're kind of doing for me or what I think they're doing. And then I put them in my directory. It's massive.
Okay, that's awesome. Thank you so much. And yeah, thanks again for this wonderful podcast interview. It's always lovely speaking with you. And if anybody else wants to contact me, you can do so at gabbypanetta.ca. Thank you again. Thank you for taking the time to do this. And I look forward to speaking soon.
Thank you.
Bye, everyone.